Hey Ellen, it's Dr. Scott. I'm going to send this file to you, but I'm putting this video together so you know what you're looking at. And there's some things in here that are not at the stage that you're at, but I kind of want to help you see where you might be going with the project, and so you kind of understand why you want to keep the participant number retained for all your segments, and why segmenting is an important thing to kind of do. It takes some time, but it really does help you in the back end. To be able to write about the data that you have. So this is a survey that I send to students in the capstone course in the English department. When I teach that class, I have students complete the survey. It becomes practice data for us to use because I teach a content analysis project for the capstone class in the English department. Students read that Geisler and Schwartz book or sections of it. But they read the coding section, the segmenting section. That's where they have a lot of questions. So we use this data as practice to kind of learn how to do use those concepts. So this is all the data. So every single question, and I'm just going to focus on one question, and that's the feedback question. There's a question in here about feedback that students appreciate, feedback that they find helpful. So I labeled that tab feedback/segmented. So retain some of the demographic questions. I definitely keep the participant number, the survey year. I did the survey over 2 or 3 years, so I kind of retain the year that I administered the survey. I treat this as a demographic question, what program they're in our department. I also treat this confidence question as a demographic question as a point of comparison. Students that are more confident compared to those that are less confident. And then these are the responses to the survey. So this is just one survey question that we're going to be talking about here. Yours, it might be different. It might be, it might be a grouping of questions. We can talk about that later. But the place where you're at, I think, is to kind of figure out what are the segments that you're going to use. How are you going to break down those responses so that you have specific things to code and you only have one code to assign to it? Because when you look at this, you might say, all right, I'm going to code this sentence, this independent clause, I'm going to code that differently than this, the second independent clause, but wait, we have this dependent clause here, so what am I doing with that? There's not really one code that you could put on this. There's definitely not one code that you could put on this, so you need to break that down into what we call segments. And segments can be independent clauses, dependent clauses. They're also T units. You can look at adjectives and verbals, and there's a whole host of things that textbook, Geisler and Schwartz's Coding Streams of Language, walks you through. So what I do is I have independent clauses, and if an independent clause is modifying something that's in another clause, I keep them together. If there's a dependent clause that's kind of modifying the other clause in the sentence, then I keep that all together. So this one response becomes these two segments. I'll code these two differently. This long block of text in the survey, I had these four segments. So you need to decide, how are you going to break that up? How are you going to split that up? And you'll try it out a little bit. It won't work at first, or it may not work at first, so you tweak that definition. Okay, I'm going to keep the independent clauses with the dependent clauses if they're the dependent clause is modifying something going on in the other clause. That's one example. So I have all of my segments here. So feedback, segmented. And then I take, copy this stuff over into this new tab called feedback coded. So I have all that demographic information so that participant repeated twice because we have two segments. And so I want to keep track of where those segments are coming from. It's coming from participant 1 in survey year 2021. That participant was an AYA student, and she strongly agreed that she's a confident writer. Over here in this column, this is the coding. And you're not here at this point yet. I think you're at this segmenting part here, where you're taking the larger things and breaking them down. And you got decisions to make about what you do with all of those questions that you have in your survey. Do you group them together, or are you just going to have a really large or a series of spreadsheets where you've got all of your data segmented out? We can talk about that stuff, but you're not at the coding part yet. But when you're ready to get there, here's what that could look like. So you see DEF, and I usually keep these things hidden when I do the coding part, so I'm not seeing any of the demographic information. So I will just have the segments and a column for codes, and sometimes I will alphabetize based on the segments and or sort them based on the segments so that I'm coding them alphabetically, so I can't say that's definitely participant 1, participant 2, so on and so forth. But this coding column, when you're going to get to this point, this is where you say, based on my research question or based on the literature review, this is that grounded theory part where like your data is speaking to you and your decisions about how to code is rooted in the data. It's grounded in the data. So specific feedback is really nice. So the code that I gave to that is specific, honest, address clarity, address repetition, so on and so forth. Once you have that, once you've gone through and coded, again, you're not there yet, but what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to sort things. We've got the codes all sorted. We have all the demographic information here. And so you can kind of start counting things, and you have something that might look a little bit more quantitative, like you can actually put some numbers to things, like the number of people that had something to say about what unhelpful feedback looked like, or they wanted thorough feedback. Specific was a trend that came back quite a bit. So you can do things like this. Those demographic things, like the different programs that we have in the English and Humanities department, I thought it was kind of interesting that the AYA students they really wanted specifics. The generalists, they didn't care that much about the specifics. And then we had some parity when it came to, we want you to address different things, like address clarity, address formatting, or what have you. There were differences between these groups, and you can really kind of see that when you're able to start counting things up after you've segmented and after you've coded, and this kind of chart will help you do that. Feedback by confidence, same thing. We compared writers who expressed their confidence as a writer as compared to those who did not, and there was some mild differences there. So that's really kind of what I wanted to show you with in the spreadsheet, and I hope that this makes sense, and I hope that you kind of see why that segmenting is kind of important and why you have to set it up in a certain way that you kind of retain those comparison points later on. There's other ways to kind of do this. It involves data models, and that can get a little wonky, but I'm happy to walk you through that stuff, or maybe try to find some links that could help, but this could be a good starting point. All right, hope that helps. Talk to you soon.